To the privileged, equality feels like oppression. For years, this phrase was weaponized by crazies against normal people who dared oppose the crazy-making of the crazies. Now, in the clearest sign culture indeed is healing itself, the crazies feel oppressed because they just got knocked off their pedestal several times over in rapid succession. Let's see how. Earlier this week, I was otherwise occupied, so I registered that Sydney Sweeney had hit the news like a bombshell, but I saw the shock and blast wave before I saw what had actually occurred at ground zero. Based on the frequency and mass fervor of coverage and discourse, my very first thought was that this had to be the fappening all over again. The notorious iCloud leak, which saw the private, explicit nude selfies of the rich and famous drop online. And that Sydney Sweeney had just joined the exclusive club of Jennifer Lawrence, Hope Solo, and Leslie Jones, among others, whose buttholes were put out in the public domain. The crazies, however, wouldn't have minded that. No, Sydney Sweeney was involved in a far worse controversy. For online, there were pictures of her fully and conservatively clad in denim that left literally everything to the imagination, and that was the entire bombshell right there. For how dare the clothes brand American Eagle feature a model that is physiologically female, of fertile age, and whose build and proportions at a base biological level signal to men that she has good genes and a high likelihood of giving birth to their offspring without too much trouble, which to the conscious mind translates that she's found to be attractive. How dare American Eagle do such a thing? This American Eagle campaign is interesting in that it did the exact opposite of, for instance, Jaguar, a brand most people now mockingly pronounce with an F. Or Bud Light, the once biggest beer brand in the world that still hasn't gotten over the stigma that drinking it will turn you gay. And for American Eagle's efforts in embracing on-brand natural beauty and attraction, its share price skyrocketed, as did their sales. Do you think that would have happened if they had gone with someone like Dylan Mulvaney instead of Sydney Sweeney? Take a moment and let me know in the comments what you think that would have done to the brand if they had done that. But go with Sweeney they did, and their share price skyrocketed for it, so job well done, you may think. But nope, not to the crazies, the ones pushing DEI, and who for years have had political power and backing in normalizing their brand of crazy-making. They obviously would have preferred seeing Dylan Mulvaney in that denim, but now when they are no longer privileged, they feel oppressed. Hence this extreme reaction from people who would much rather American Eagle feature a more inclusive model who reflects what the world actually looks like, who makes people feel seen and saves lives, and all their other BS spin lines. Which is code for that they want some extreme minority within minority that is so over the top that most of the world would see it as an exclusionary joke and a clown show if they actually did. But the radical activists would have been happy as another company went down in the DEI flames. Since they went with Sweeney though, the activists are enraged, accusing American Eagle of Nazism as well as eugenics, presumably because the men seeing the ad would rather she be the mother of their kids, rather than some beached whale or the Dylan Mulvaneys of the world. The backlash from neo-Puritans and crazies was so extreme that even outlets like Fortune broke it down, which they had to do for most people as the most extreme reactions came from crazies on TikTok. That being said, even some major outlets griped, like MSNBC, who wrote, "Sydney Sweeney's ad shows an unbridled cultural shift towards whiteness," which evidently is a horrible, horrible thing in a nation that is majority white, and where the built-in customer base even sways conservative. The resident crazy at MSNBC writes, "The backlash has been swift and fierce, and some of it at least, if you ask the writer, is fair." The internet has been quick to condemn the advertisement as non-inclusive at best and as overtly promoting white supremacy and Nazi propaganda at worst. These critics point to the copy and implication of calling a white person superior because of their genes, which means they are really reaching. In the videos, Sweeney exudes a sort of vintage sexiness that caters to the male gaze. She embodies the near-mythological girl-next-door beautiful but low-maintenance sexy femininity that dominated media in the 1990s and early 2000s. Together, the campaign feels regressive and not retro, offensive and not cheeky. And jumping forward a bit, the author editorializes a bit more, saying, "I cannot blame Sweeney for financially benefiting from a system that is going to exploit her either way. Still, her willingness to participate in such an obviously damaging, and depending on who you ask, even dangerous advertising campaign as the latest American Eagle collection is disappointing." The piece is then concluded, "It isn't just that far-right ideology is proliferating on the fringe. Our entire cultural ethos has moved further right, allowing for this sort of content." And Sweeney and American Eagle deserve much scrutiny over this, but so does our own crumbling and fractured American culture that made this all possible in the first place. Of course, what the crazy at MSNBC isn't telling you is that crazies like this one at MSNBC are the ones responsible for the American culture fracturing in the first place, with their attempts at normalizing their own crazy making. This all reminds me of the situation with Zelda from a few weeks ago, when activists proclaiming themselves to be fans, even though there are no such things, demanded that Hunter Schafer, a trans activist sporting an Adam's apple and fully functional male genitalia, be cast as the Nintendo heroine, and then threw a collective hissy fit when Nintendo decided not to Bud Light their brand by casting an actual female for the role instead. There have been rumors that much of that was caused by PR agencies working for Team Schafer, but whatever the truth of that, it is stuff like this that is fracturing culture, causing hate and division in the process. This ad with Sydney Sweeney and the positive response it has gotten from everyone normal is a sign that culture is starting to heal, even if there is a long way to go still, because no one ever asked for all the madness the activists are pressuring for, and that for the longest of time, major corporations succumbed to. For the last few years, we at Midnight Sedge have been exposing the corporate power and push behind DEI, and how the ones responsible for that push forced it upon your average company, and especially your huge corporation, by increasingly linking the credit lines these companies rely on in their day-to-day operations to their DEI score.
You now make a point of, that's an investment criteria for you.
Well, behaviors are going to have to change, and this is one thing we're asking companies. You have to force behaviors, and at BlackRock we are forcing behaviors. 54% of the incoming class are women. We added 4 more points in terms of diverse employment this year, and what we are doing internally is, if you don't achieve these levels of impact, your compensation could be impacted. Okay,
we're doing the same thing.
And so it's just you have to force behaviors, and if you don't force behaviors, whether it's gender or race or just any way you want to say the composition of your team, you're going to be impacted, and that's not recruiting, it is development, as Ken said. And ultimately, it's still going to take time, but I am just as much shocked as Ken is that we have not seen more opportunities, and we're going to have to force change.
That's why all these companies participated in the crazy making, not because they wanted it, not because they believed they were doing something good for society, but because they might lose their access to credit if they didn't. And that is an operational risk they could not take, especially not if their customers, by and large, let them get away with it. The only way out of this predicament for normal people, as we've been saying for years, is for the customers of the normal persuasion, who make up nigh on 99% of the market, to vote with their wallets, and do so in large enough numbers that the loss of customers from corporate DEI and wokeness poses a greater operational risk to the company than does the loss of their access to credit lines. The moment that happens is when culture starts to heal, and the biggest sign that is happening is when the crazies have their pedestal of privilege pulled out from underneath them, so they start feeling oppressed, when in actuality they're experiencing equality, only in a market where they represent an extreme minority and not the norm. And that, my friends, is what we're seeing now. If you agree with that, please smash that like. Subscribe if you haven't already done so for more content like this, and for a whole backlog of videos exposing and having fun with DEI. And of course, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comments.